In Matthew 12, Jesus tells us that our words matter. They mean something. Words can be the balance between forgiveness or condemnation, creation or destruction. The words we say form not only ourselves, but others. With our words, we create reality. As an author and writer, I take this to heart. Words are the tools that I use all day, every day, and Jesus says that there's a weightiness to that. Am I bringing words of truth and life and goodness? Am I representing the kingdom of compassion and justice, or am I heaping condemnation, ugliness, and hate? Am I birthing good into the world, or just adding to the noise? They say that the pen is mightier than the sword, and there's truth to that. What a nation might refuse to do under threat of violence, they may be compelled to do after being exposed to words and ideas over time. We are far more likely to harm another person if we've first been speaking badly about them. So I think often of what C.S. Lewis said in his essay, The Weight of Glory, that every person we encounter is an eternal being on a journey to light or to darkness. And every encounter, we either move them closer to God or further away. That's the power of our words. Not just mine as an author, but all of us who are made in the image of God. And that's why our spiritual health matters so deeply. Jesus teaches us here that our words overflow from what's actually in our hearts. What is buried deeply within us? Are we afraid? Angry? Then fear and anger will come through our words, no matter how hard we work to control our tongues. Are we filling our hearts and minds with Christ and the fruit of the Spirit, with what is good and right and just and compassionate? Are we listening to voices that encourage us to love each other? More than anything else, this is why I started writing, and this is what compels me as I write. Whether I'm working on a book, an article, or a social media post, how are my words impacting the hearts of others? Am I collecting words that make me sound right and smart and superior? Or am I collecting words that reflect the image and loving character of God? Will these words build up the people who hear or read them? Will it encourage them to turn towards God's kindness? I'm struck by how much this matters to God. Colossians tells us to speak graciously always. Proverbs tells us to use a soft answer even when someone is attacking us in anger. Ephesians tells us to use our words only to build each other up and provide grace to those who hear, to be kind to each other. And Jesus says in this passage that our words have the power to prove if God's Spirit is actually alive and working in us, the power to provide goodness or evil for those around us. Writing is really kind of a spiritual discipline for me, or a spiritual practice. I find my own thoughts as I'm studying the Bible, studying our own reality, and trying to put them together. I figure out what God is teaching me or what I believe as I'm going through the process of forming the words. And if I'm writing something like a book, I'm going over these words for months and months and months. And there is nothing that's been more impactful, I think, to my spiritual formation than wrestling with these words and attempting to be faithful to what we have in Scripture while also representing what's true about reality. There's so many words in our world right now. There's words everywhere. There's words on the radio and on the television, on the internet, 24 hours a day. So many of the words are destructive. So much of it is trying to distract us from what's important or even cause harm. We are discipled every day by words. We don't really know what the source is or what the motivation is or what their goal is. We just are imbibing these words from all around us, and we are being formed by them without really thinking, who's paying for this or who's benefiting from this. I can distinctly remember waking up one morning and having a time of prayer with God and just being so struck with just this sentence in my head that I wanted to join the conversation. And not that I could ever drown out all the words, and nor would I want to. I don't want to have that kind of power. But I would love to enter the conversation with some light and point people to God to point people to the love that God has for us, the love that God asks for us to embody, and to take that seriously. Like, what would happen if we actually spent time, our conversational time, our words, wrestling with what it looked like to receive God's love and then to embody God's love. I researched and wrote extensively in my most recent book, which is about loving neighbors and strangers and enemies, about the research that has been done on the psychological impact that the words that we hear and the words that we say has on our behavior, both as individuals and collectively. A person is much more likely to assault another person if they have been using dehumanizing or hateful or fearful words about them. And a nation, a group of people, is far more likely to harm or, as simple as neglect a group of people if they have been hearing messages saying those people are going to harm us, those people are dangerous, those people are pigs or dogs or illegal or whatever non-human alien word you want to use. Once we've heard those words often enough, just a space opens in our worldview that allows us to neglect them, which as Christians, we're not allowed to neglect anyone. We are called to sacrificially love our neighbors, but even strangers and even our enemies. So neglect is not an option for Christians, but that space opens up even for us to harm or destroy. And it begins with the power of our words. I don't see a lot of discipleship around how we speak to each other, whether it's on Twitter or on television or just over dinner. I don't see a lot of emphasis, but in Paul's letters to the Christians, I see a lot of emphasis on our spiritual health being gauged by what's flowing out of our hearts. Is it kindness? Is it love? Is it gentleness? Is it forgiveness? I think we are so focused on our big platforms and our big influence and influencers, we forget that it's the people that we live with, the people that we work with, the people that we buy our groceries from, or the people we see at school. Those are the people whose lives we're going to change for good or for bad. For the person who is wanting to grow in this area and conform their words to Christ, asking for feedback is a hard one for us, but it's key. I do think that writing can be a useful tool. We can look back and see what we've said, what we've thought. We can kind of give ourselves some feedback as we realize where our thoughts were off, where we were getting maybe hung up on our own insecurities or our own egos. And I would say read the Bible and look at the words carefully. Like, look at the songs that people are singing. They are so focused on God, so unconscious of ourselves. Are those the words that we bring to God? Look at the words, like I mentioned, that Paul is using to talk to the Christian communities that are struggling to get along with each other. It wasn't easy. They were struggling so hard to get along, and he is encouraging them. And we seem to gloss over those passages that talk about how we should treat each other and how we should talk to each other. I would say pay attention to the words in the Bible that are about words and compare them to how we speak in our Christian communities, how we speak about God, how we speak about each other, how we speak about our fellow brothers and sisters out in the world. And keep trying to narrow that gap between the fruit of the Spirit and the fruit of our hearts.